So there have been a few times where I have seen the woke comic or the SJW comic or the feminist comic on Twitter. And I've gotten angry and I've seen the logical fallacy and I feel like, should I make a video where I go through this comic and I explain the logical fallacy? And I stop myself from doing it. And one of the reasons I am stopping myself from doing that is this is going on the Uncut channel for like controversial content because I'm talking about feminism. But one of the reasons I'm stopping myself from yelling at SJW comics is I'm really worried about the future. And I've kind of like taken to heart the problem that I don't think anti-SJW YouTube is getting us anywhere. Now I feel these emotions, I want to express myself, but is me just making content for people who are already mad at SJWs going to help anything? Like, how are we going to actually move the ball forward and have a positive effect on the culture? Can we have a positive effect on the culture? Are we all doomed? But like most normal people, when I read about feminism, I instantly start thinking about MGTOWs and incels and the alt-right and all of these new movements. Something I kind of put two and two together on is I keep having the same kind of conversation that I would have 10 years ago. A feminist would say it is sexist for a woman to be in a bikini and look beautiful, but it's not sexist for a man to be in a thong and look beautiful because the woman in the bikini is designed for the male gaze and the man in the thong is designed for a male power fantasy. And you're just like groaning to yourself because they are importing a system and demanding you to operate by their system. And if you try to critique the system from without, the problem is they are within the system. So it's basically asking them to like, okay, take this carpet and get this carpet out from under your feet. No, this is my carpet. This is the carpet I want to stand on. I don't want to stand on any other carpet. Yeah, but I want you to try to maybe think outside the box and think. Imagine if you weren't standing on this carpet. Imagine if you weren't in this castle, right? I want to tie this into what I've been thinking about for the alt-right, whatever that is. So I'm really thinking about the Groyper movement. And I want to be careful because I think the internet, I love the internet, but the internet's basically ruined our ability to talk about anything because so many people can use the internet. Like, go back 100 years and you could probably like, take a philosophy class, sit in a library and read the great philosophers, and you could probably get like a pretty solid knowledge of the main philosophical thinkers and the main philosophical movements, right? Because it was only the rich, retired guys, basically, who had the time and the energy to sit around and think thoughts all day and not, go bust their hump, right? And then with the internet, when people talk about, everyone talks about information overload, but one of the things the internet has done is it's allowed almost anyone to make a podcast or start a blog or be an amateur scholar, some of whom provide really, really good content, and, a lot of garbage goes out there too. And it also makes it harder that, someone could have multiple identities. You don't know if that account is someone arguing with themselves to make a fake argument or create a straw man version of themselves, like they role play as the opposite opinion to themselves and they make their role play account like really stupid, right? So the internet itself, in spite of all the blessings it's given us, has basically confused our ability to talk about any of these things. So what I want to be careful about is I don't just want to say Groyper is alt-right because the mainstream media said Pepe is alt-right, and based on the usage of the Pepe meme, I know it's not an exclusively alt-right meme. It's a meme loved by lots of different people for lots of different reasons. So, but at the same time, alt-right people obviously love the Pepe meme, and some alt-right people obviously love the Groyper meme. I don't think that poisons the meme and makes every usage of the meme alt-right, but it's just, I've browsed 4chan enough to know that on 4chan they don't like Jews, and they don't like, what else do they not like on 4chan? They talk a lot about, and they have lots of crazy conspiracy theories, right? And to what extent do they even believe in the conspiracy theories on 4chan? Do they believe in all of this Illuminati stuff because they actually believe that's real? Or are they joking around and they're just saying that because they think it's funny? On the internet, I think anonymity is a blessing. I want people to be anonymous on the internet. I want there to be spaces for people to say stupid things on the internet. But one of the consequences of anonymity is you have a hard time telling who's being serious and who really believes this stuff, who's only pretending to believe the earth is flat and who actually really sincerely believes the earth is flat. So Andrew Klavan had a Groyper write in. Groyper was really mad at Andrew Klavan, and I think if most Groypers would actually go listen to some of the different types of conservatives, they would see that there's actually a lot more diversity amongst different conservatives than you might think if you only listen to like one or two. Like if you only listen to Ben Shapiro, like there's a lot of diversity. Ben Shapiro does not represent me on every single issue. He doesn't represent all conservatives, right? There is some back and forth within conservatism, you know, and between conservatives and libertarians, between conservatives, libertarians, and classical liberals. I think the sort of conservative love of freedom of speech is allowing a conversation to take place. Now, the Groypers actually most remind me of kind of like Pat Buchanan and the paleo conservatives. So a lot of them are Gen Zs, but it's actually like a really boomer philosophy if you dig into it. I read what was a really good, actually, Groyper post. I'm not talking about mental load because it pained me so much it scarred me. But I read what was a really good post by someone who was critical of the conservative movement, arguing basically that the conservative movement doesn't ever look at itself critically or think about its problems. And he'll use a guy like Gene Edward Veith as an example, where Gene Edward Veith argues that California is full of homelessness, it's full of feces, it's losing power. This is an illustration of the failures of leftism. And the dissident right argues that the conservative right never really understands the nature of the left, and they are always ceding ground to the left. So what was his name? Great. I'll just copy it and put it in the description of this video. I don't think he's an alt-right guy, but he's clearly like a Groyper. He clearly sympathizes with the Groypers who are asking these tough questions of conservatives. So the basic thrust of the argument is if the left is actually evil, then we no longer have this ability to, you know, come let us reason together and debate the facts with one another. Because they're evil, they actually want the bad thing. You can't argue with them on the basis of common sense or argue with them on the basis of what your ideas will be bad for the country. That's the whole point, because they're evil. And a lot of conservatives do tend to, I think, overemphasize the goodness of human nature. Oh, if we can just come together and reason in the marketplace of ideas, we'll fix it. No, there is a really evil, despicable element to the intersectional left that is just vile. The most pure evil ideology I can think of is intersectional leftism. And yet, I have all of this sympathy and empathy for SJWs, for feminists. I understand where they're coming from. I don't respect their dumb ideas, but I feel for them as human beings. I feel their pain, and I sympathize with them because they are allowing an ideology to corrupt even that which is good within them. Even like their motherly virtues get corrupted and twisted towards their political ideology. Even their correct, like, respect of human life gets corrupted and twisted towards their ideology. The most pernicious kind of evil is that which misdirects your good intentions and your good beliefs towards evil ends and evil purposes. And I'm willing to call it that because when you read the scholars, when you read the big heads who actually know what they're talking about, it permeates their writing. It is poisonous to your soul to try to read these radical feminists or read what was the guy? What was the sadomasochist name? I think Foucault, the French guy who was obsessed with torture. To read people talking about people in the suburbs like they're scum of the earth. You do not hate Osama bin Laden more than some of these intersectional postmodern theorist types hate the average American family just living in a little house in the suburbs. It's an evil philosophy. So because it's an evil philosophy, it corrupts people who are otherwise very good, very decent people, and it ends up poisoning everything about their worldview, because everything about their worldview becomes fixated in this narrow little world. And so the mental load, I read most of it. I tried to get through it all. It's just too much pain to my soul to force myself to read all of it. And you can say, oh, well, how can you critique it if you haven't read all of it? I've read some chunks of it. They're self-contained chapters. So I have a thrust for whole chunks of her argument. It's intersectionalism. And sort of what I've learned from the dissident right, or what I think is correct about the dissident right, is I think they correctly understand that the traditional right doesn't know how to fight this cultural problem. They're kind of clueless. They're kind of losers. But I think the problem with the dissident right is the same as the problem with the incels, or the problem with feminists, for that matter, is they start with something correct. They focus you on this narrow point and say, well, what about this? And you say, huh, that's a good point. That's correct. But then they make that central to everything else. So kind of for the alt-right, they'll say, well, the liberals say that demographics is destiny, that they're going to eliminate the white race. And they're right. A lot of people on the left openly talk about how much they hate whites and what they want to get rid of whites. They're not secret about it. They're eager about it. I remember the entire lead up to the 2016 election. I was reading article after article after article about how, white people were on the way out. It was a brown future for America. They were coming for the religion, for the tax-exempt status on the religions. They were coming for religious exemptions. They were just so eager to get Hillary Clinton elected and carry on the next step of the culture war. And that's one of the reasons why I'm really ticked off at the traditional right that went beyond saying, I have disagreements with Trump, I believe there are flaws in Trump's character, to actively saying they would support Hillary Clinton over a Donald Trump, because they were basically betraying people like me and the normal families to this evil international global postmodern elite. And if you can't see that evil and how corrupting it is to normal people, then I don't want to hear your thoughts on Trump's rude tweets, frankly. So, feminism. I'm sorry, I was talking about the alt-right. So the alt-right starts with this kind of like important point. What the heck are we going to do about the anti-white left? And then they build everything around, kind of centered around that point. Incels will start with, why don't women like me? Why are women so mean to me? Why are women hypergamous? So they might focus on like a correct point, but then they build a whole idea of women around that correct point and say, well, all women are terrible. I won't judge them as individuals. I will judge them solely as women, and I hate these bad things women do. I'm going to judge all women by this one point. Black Panthers, they'll say, blacks are being lynched, blacks are being mistreated in this country. Okay, that's a correct point. Blacks are being mistreated. Therefore, there's this invisible system of white oppression, and we must use all extremist ideologies. Marxism, the poor have it hard. Yep, the poor have it hard. It's rough to live in this modern age. Capitalism isn't always that fun. Sometimes people get left behind. It's rough for the poor. Okay, let's tear down everything and build a communist utopia. What? The problem of an extremist ideology is always it starts with something correct and then goes off into la-la land. Intersectionalism is an attempt to make these disparate ideologies work together somehow by saying, well, it's not just whiteness that's the problem. It's not just the patriarchy that's the problem. It's not just Christianity that's the problem. It's not just heteronormativity that's the problem. They sort of mix them all together and say it's white, cis, heteronormative Christian patriarchy. That's the great evil, and it's women, trans, minorities, foreigners, and like non-imperialist, non-Western cultures, and Muslims that are the victim of the evil. Now, what the dissident right is correct about is, if the traditional right tries to approach something like intersectionalism with logic, the problem is the system as it's designed doesn't care about logical consistency. It was intersectionalism and all these crazy disparate ideas. They weren't put together because someone said these ideas go together really well. They fit together logically. They were put together after the fact to create a justification for a political coalition where actually a lot of the ideas don't make sense with one another, which means you can instantly see the logical flaws, but they don't care about the logical flaws. So I'm going to show you me looking for logical flaws and why that doesn't work, because the only thing that matters is foundation. So I look at it, feminist comic, and I see, oh, the clitoris, female parts. Well, wait a second. Logically, what does a clitoris have to do with being a feminist in post-2016 when we're told that men can be women and women can be men? What does having a vagina have to do with being a feminist? What does having a vagina have to do with being a woman anymore? Well, that's someone looking at this through a logical framework trying to say, does intersectionalism make sense logically? Is it internally consistent? Do its theories not contradict one another? oh, but that doesn't matter. Like today we can say, oh, the vagina monologues, let's talk about having a clitoris, and let's talk about like being a mother and getting parental leave. That's feminism in 2010. But that it's 2019 now, and now the new revolution is the trans revolution against the TERF feminists, right? It doesn't matter that there is this tension between the belief that you should organize a philosophy of feminism around the concept of the female, and a concept of male and female where those are just terms of art, they don't really exist, and like a gay political movement which says if I'm a man and I love a man, then I'm a minority, and a trans movement that says those words man don't mean anything. None of these should really hold together at all, which is why there's a lot of cannibalism and leftists hating other leftists, is they really don't have a shared ground to talk about any of these issues, but they basically recognize they have a common enemy, and they think, well, let's put the intersectionalist Band-Aid on it, and we will create our new world. Literally, Emma talks about this in The Mental Load of Feminist Comment. Jumping ahead, really everything you need to know, this is one of the things I hate about propaganda, is everything you need to know about it is really on the introduction, or the stupid artist placard tells you everything you're supposed to think about the artwork and its silly philosophy. So, I feel for Emma. I feel for Emma because she's starting with a legitimate problem, but then she uses the legitimate problem as a launching board for a narrow ideology where, frankly, she just doesn't know what she's talking about, and the consequences of this are absolutely poisonous. Until 2010, I was a little model citizen. I studied, and then I worked, I gave to charity, I voted, and I recycled. I could see that things weren't going well in the world, and I thought that it was because of people who didn't study, didn't work, didn't give to charity, didn't vote, and didn't recycle. So she had an elitist worldview. She was kind of like a general leftist, and then she got radicalized and realized this is not enough. We must have an awakening. Age 30, I partly found myself on the side of those who bear the brunt of the system. I realized that far from contributing to the improvement of my society, I had participated in its downfall. I had a political awakening. This is religious language. Intersectionalism doesn't have Jesus. Knock, knock, knock. Hello, would you like to talk about your Lord and Savior intersectional theory? There's no heaven. You'll just die in obscurity and be forgotten. But you'll get to feel guilty all your life and pathetic. Doesn't that sound like a great religion? You cannot escape religion. I really think, okay, so earlier I was talking about like points where you start at, right? I guess I've got to talk about the gospel now, because I don't want to do like another cringy anti-SJW comic video. So I've got to talk about the gospel, because that's the specific thing I've got to get to. If the alt-right fixates on race as the central topic through which you have to view everything else, if incels or MGTOWs kind of see gender as the central topic through which you have to view everything else, and if kind of like the feminists view patriarchy as the lens, and if Black Panthers view oppression of blacks as the lens through which you view everything else, I think y'all need Jesus. The framework you should be using to look at these disparate movements is Christianity, is Jesus Christ specifically, not even just like the ideas of Christianity. Like I'm serious. Like, don't just like listen to Jordan Peterson talk about, his interpretation of the stories. Like, sit your butt down in a chair, read the Bible, because they didn't teach you that in public school, and you ought to read it just to understand anything. And think about it beyond just the moral implications. So I talk a lot about the moral implications of stories on this channel, because I think that's a really important part of the arts. The arts instill or communicate to young children important moral values. But there is more to the world than just moralism. I reread The Pilgrim's Progress recently, and Mr. Worldly Wiseman, he saves Pilgrim out of the bog of the slough of despondency, and he points him towards the city of morality, where he claims they can cure him of his burden. But surprise, surprise, the people in morality are, hucksters. They say they can cure you of your burden, but all they really do is they can like nip at it. They can't really get it off of you. So evangelist sends Christian to Christ, who actually removes the burden from him. And I for something like my depression, for example, when you're depressed, you feel nihilistic. You feel no hope. And so something like, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, say the conservatives. Have you tried just not being sad, say the positivists, you need something more substantive than be happy or work hard or make more money when you are depressed. And the thing about a relationship with Christ is all of your life and then all of your thinking gets ordered around something substantive. So when I feel sad and I don't feel happy, I can have hope in spite of that, because it is a more substantial foundation, because it's the truth. Then I destroyed my political enemy today. I made a stand against the patriarchy today. If all you have left is a political victory, you're always going to be depressed, because politics and human history is a depressing affair. I think Andrew Clavin says human life is a tragedy to the man who feels, and a comedy to the man who thinks. I think I'm paraphrasing that, right? So Andrew Clavin, I disagree with him. I don't always agree with him, but the fact that he's an artist, I think, gives him a different perspective than the average conservative. And I'm really, really, really enjoying Another Kingdom, and I'll talk about that later. But within Another Kingdom, he's basically making a correct metaphor for the overarching problem, which is that the new left, without any foundation for morality, without any foundation for truth, believes that all reality can be constructed, basically. And Emma basically gives the game away that for her, the purpose of her political awakening is to construct this new society. I quickly understood that on my own, I couldn't shake things up. In order to act, we must be many. So getting woke and awakening, a religious experience whereby intersectionalism becomes your new foundation. Not just that you think it, but that you're emotionally connected to it as your everything. That's the power of collective intelligence. I like common sense. Like, common sense is just like a really simple term for people think that, right? But at least common sense has like a nice, proletariat, average Joes and Janes. They have common sense. Don't cross the street when there's a red light. What the heck is collective intelligence? Ugh. If we all influence the decisions that concern us, only then will they be made in the general interest. Who cares about the general interest? What about the interest of the minorities who are at the whims of the majority? Good grief. First world privileged mommy political theory. But if we continue to rely on a handful of leaders, they will serve their own. It's hard to escape our social conditioning, and the more I spoke to people, the more I was confronted with my own preconceptions. We couldn't stand up for ourselves. The world was the way it was. We had to do as we were told and not complain. Study, work, vote, recycle, and teach the same things to our children. So I began to draw my ideas. It went viral. I remember when this went viral. Like, all the feminist students at my class, they were really excited by this. They were talking about the mental load in class after class, because that's basically what our universities have become. They become a way, it's self-fulfilling, that artists like Emma devote themselves naturally to perpetuating this theory to younger people, to like unfortunate students, to whatever poor schmuck kid's feminist mom made them sit down and read this for their homework. She's taking a complicated BS philosophical construct that's really complicated and basically only belongs in the halls of academic debate, and they're trying to inculcate young people with it, dumbing it down, of course, but that's the purpose. You've got it. They need to get it into the hands of 6-year-olds. And one of the things that prompted me to do this is my library in like a nice little, red state. When they promote books, it's all like, identity politics, this, identity politics, that. Clearly the libraries are a like little alcove where they're using their kind of power and influence to say, hey, kids, read this. And kids shouldn't be reading this. This is an adult topic. This is an adult conversation. I don't want anyone inculcating my kids or my nephews and nieces in this stuff. Get your kids out of the public schools. They are not going to teach them how to think critically about these topics. They are going to teach them what to think. And woe betide your kids if they ask, the few tough questions that poke holes in this stuff. Now, this is really harsh on Emma, but you know what? I respect her. I respect that she had the chutzpah to make comics and put it out there. Where's the men's rights alternative to the mental road? Where's the conservative alternative to the mental load? This is why conservatives and libertarians and classical liberals and whatever the right is evolving into. I'm not going along with the alt-right, but if there's going to be if the right evolves into something that isn't racist and they're critical of old conservatives, I'm fine with that. I'm critical of old conservatives. Whatever we do, we must engage the culture with it, even if you can only draw little stick people or little simple doodly cartoons. Do it. Do it. Do you have a good argument? Do you have a good idea? Do it. Make this some dumb little cartoon. Now, maybe the libraries won't put your book out there because you're questioning the woke scold narrative, but that's got to be better than, I don't know, role-playing some anime character on Twitter, and then Twitter deletes all your tweets, and you amounted it to nothing. Communicate your ideas to Joe Schmo and Jane Doe and their 6-year-olds. Get your ideas on that shelf space to compete. Collective intelligence has no borders, and I know that all around the world, many citizens are already getting involved in discussing this future society. I don't want you managing my future society because you don't even understand what makes men tick. So, after of course talking about the correct point she starts with is sometimes men and women have a difficult time communicating, and this puts an emotional burden on women. So I think a mature husband listens to his wife, and he considers the fact that maybe his wife communicates in a different way than he does. Now, for Emma, all of the burden and all of the responsibility, ironically, is being placed on men. So if a man says, "Why didn't you ask me to help you?" that's a fault in Emma's mind, in the minds of men. They shouldn't be asking, men shouldn't ask wives, why don't you ask me to help you? Why don't you tell me what you need me to do? Men and women should share equally in. But what's really ironic about this is she's trying to make a point about how men should act, but the consequence is she basically ends up admitting that women have a hard time telling you what they want you to do, and women often expect you to just read their minds. Come on, Emma. All right, but there actually is a legitimate point buried in here, which is that a mature man should try to understand how a woman communicates differently than a man. But the counterpoint to that never gets discussed is how a mature woman should try to understand how men communicate and how men look at the world. And it's just really painfully obvious that Emma doesn't think that much about this. So if a man assumes that his wife is the household manager or the project leader, ironically, that's a way in which a man is kind of respecting the authority of a woman in his household, even if he has kind of a traditional I wear the pants in the family, I bring home the bacon attitude. If he says, I trust my wife to make some decisions, he's saying, I'm trusting my wife with decision-making power. So that's actually kind of a sweet thing. But her point is that if women are responsible for the caretaking of the home, they have a mental, this is so first world problem kind of thing. Now, she's right. It's not nice if a man, just expects his wife to magically do everything for him and never does anything for her. It'd be a really nice thing if a man did the dishes for his wife without being asked, right? That'd be a really nice thing. But what Emma assumes with her feminist framework is, could it be possible that maybe the husband and wife like this division of labor? The wife likes taking care of her kids, she likes being home, she likes handling the dishes, and the man likes going and breaking apart concrete, and that's where his mental labor is. So when she illustrates it, of course, it's the woman with all the mental labor and the man just relaxing. Okay, well, why isn't she out? Let's trade. Let's have her go out and break the concrete and bend over, doing back-breaking labor all day, be in a job that's really dangerous and there's a lot of workplace fatalities, and he'll take on the mental load for... it's like that old classic sitcom thing where they actually switch roles and they find out that neither person's job is super duper easy. They both kind of need each other. That kind of thing. I think Emma lacks the maturity basically to see how the world is more complicated than just poor benighted women and mean old men who just don't get it. I'm not going to belabor that. So jumping ahead. We give the game away. So, of course, there's nothing genetic or innate about this behavior. We're not born with an all-consuming passion for clearing tables, women, just like boys aren't born with an utter disinterest for things lying around. So this is her putting on her, I'm going to do some social commentary hat. I'm going to be a sociologist. She doesn't know anything about this. Emma, I was a boy. So let me explain to you the logic of why I would have things lying around, especially when I was a boy, even now, even after I've learned to clean my room. So when I was a boy, I would drive number one Mama Duke mad because my room was always a pit. And the reason my room was always a pit was I wanted to build things with Legos. And for me to build things with Legos, I need to be able to see the Legos. So I take the box, I turn over the box, and I pour all the Legos on the floor so I can see all the different colors and all the different pieces. And now I need to build a Gandalf castle because I have Harry Potter pieces, but I really want a place to play Lord of the Rings with my Legos. So I need to see all the pieces so I can see the right colors, and I need to make the Gandalf castle. What? My room's a mess, but I need to make a Gandalf castle. You don't understand. It is really, really, really important for me to make a Gandalf castle. That was why my room was a mess, because I didn't care. I wanted to build a thing and have my action figures fight Sauron. So while doing that, while focusing on building that cool thing where I could have people fighting each other, of course, my room would get messy because I was dumping things out to put the pieces in a place where I could just like grab them, go crazy, and build, right? No one came along and said, in a patriarchal society, you don't have to clean up your room because mommy or your wife will clean it up for you. I got messy because I was a child playing. Now, my mom could do two things. She would tell me to clean my room, and usually the punishment for me not cleaning my room was I was living in a messy room, and I would step on the Lego, and it would hurt, and I would feel sad, and then I'd say, okay, I don't like stepping on Legos, so I guess mom's right, I'll clean my room. Once in a blue moon, Mom would clean my room just as a way of doing something nice for me, right? And I would always feel a little guilty, but also a little touched that she would do that for me. So years flash forward, and Jordan Peterson becomes a meme basically for telling people to clean their room. Now, I wouldn't consider myself a Jordan Peterson fanboy. I don't worship Jordan Peterson. I don't automatically believe something is true just because Jordan Peterson says it. But the reason I'm fascinated with Jordan Peterson is he obviously resonated with a lot of young men. So basically, when it takes a feminist like Emma, like multiple pages to say, is to basically passively aggressively say, hey men, clean up for your wives, or they will bear the mental load and you're complicit in patriarchy. No man on the planet is going to read this and say, well, I guess I got to clean up for my wives because I'm complicit in patriarchy. What Jordan Peterson did is he said, clean your room, because cleaning your room is like fighting a dragon. Men like fighting dragons. Men like fixing problems. Well, your messy room is a problem, so slay the dragon and clean your room. And then every young man said, oh my gosh, I've always wanted to beat a dragon. And so then we said, okay, my room's the dragon, I'm going to clean my room, right? How is it that Jordan Peterson got men to realize they need to clean their room, while feminists, sharing years worth of mental load feminist comics weren't able to communicate that because the feminists weren't listening to men. The feminists weren't figuring out how to talk to men. The feminists didn't care about what motivates a man. They have their system. They are going to try to make the men fit into their system like a square peg in a round hole, and then pound it in there until the men fit with what they think they're supposed to think. And I'm going to show you this. A culture in which the media essentially portray women as mothers and wives, while men are heroes who go on fascinating ventures away from home. Goodbye, my love, off to save the world. And then later she's got a picture of a modern man who's off to save capitalism, because capitalism is part of the intersectionalist problem. So this is a problem. Now, you might say, well, she's not saying it's wrong to teach boys to go off to save the world. We just want girls to teach girls to go off to save the world too. But then we jump ahead. Of course, this means we have to raise our children as far away as possible from stereotypes to offer them a fairer future than the one we've got. So what's the stereotype? The story of the young man going off to save the world is the stereotype to avoid. You can't fix this problem just by also having stories where women save the world. I like those stories too, but there is a purpose for this kind of story. The purpose of this kind of story is basically to prepare young men to die horribly on the battlefield. Now, that's something that feminists just can't talk about because there's no way to make that fit into this. Men dying in the workplace, male suicide rates, men dying on the battlefield, men getting attacked in videos by people, but if you film a video of a woman attacking a man, people just laugh or ignore it. Those kinds of things, they just don't know how to make it fit into like mainstream TM feminism, so they're just ignored. At most, they'll say something like, hey men, it's okay to talk about your feelings. Hey men, you know, we know toxic masculinity and the patriarchy hurts you too. Hey man, toxic masculinity tells you to be a tough man. No, they just are not listening. When a man tells you that feminism is hurting him, how do you make that fit into this worldview? If you are ideologically committed to the worldview, if you make the worldview your foundation upon which you build anything, the conversation kind of ends there because you have no capacity to understand that within your system. If you actually listen to a man and let him express himself, you basically can't simultaneously tell me that my feelings matter and I should talk about my feelings and I'm bad if I honestly tell you about my feelings and how bad women hurt the emotions of young men, right? The moral thing to do is to recognize that that's not all women do that to young men, but there are obviously ways that a woman can hurt a man emotionally, break him down, emotionally manipulate and abuse him. And feminism, unfortunately, gives bad people an ideology with which to explain away their bad behavior. So the stereotype of the young man going off to save the world basically exists because men disproportionately die in war, and we're needing to teach them the kind of qualities which say, you take that kid and you get out of here. I'm going to get like a rock and go hold off the people who are coming to kill you and try to slow them down. I know I'm going to die. They will probably torture me if they don't kill me, but you need to get out of here with my child because I don't want them getting here, right? That kind of frontier mentality that basically was the truth for most of human history, like, the Genghis Khan, the Assyrians. The world is full of misery and pain and death and destruction. It's awful, but the kind of mentality we had to teach young men was to protect women and children from the awful realities of the world, because it isn't fun to do that. It isn't fun to die in a ditch with your guts spilling out or with your dead friend behind you crying for your mom. But we have to teach young men to have these kinds of qualities, or we're doomed, or they will just get jaded and check out like young men are doing. And the feminists have no way to inspire a young man to heroism, to inspire a young man to courage and these masculine ideals, because they hate the masculine ideals. We're screwed. Jumping ahead, we have a conversation like she lives in fake news world, right? So male politicians get to be aggressive, blah, 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 blah. But female politicians, they don't get to be aggressive. Never mind that Harvard literally did a bit where they had a woman play Donald Trump and they had a man play Hillary Clinton. And most people thought that the male Hillary Clinton was a sleazebag, and I really liked the female Donald Trump. She seemed awesome. I would vote for female Donald Trump in a heartbeat. But we live in fake news world where we just assume something exists, and if you draw a cute little picture of it, then you don't need to defend it. Now, here is Emma illustrating a conversation with a man about feminism. And you can just see that this is a world without... This is a Tom Preston comic. This is a world where her ideas are not scrutinized, and basically where unfortunate facts are not entered into it, because if those unfortunate facts were to be entered into it or considered, well, they go against the foundation we're standing on. So we gotta get rid of those. At work or in the context of my activism, men are often getting angry at me. Why, Emma? And I know that if I react in the same way, I'll be called hysterical. Now, she thinks that hysterical is like a patriarchal code word to dismiss women's anger. What she doesn't get is that, of course, men are always running this in the background too. I've got to be careful. I've got to not lose my temper. People don't like an angry man. People call the police on an angry man. If I lose my temper, my wife could lie about me and take the kids and say, well, he yelled at me once, right? Like, of course, men are worried about being perceived as angry too, but in her worldview, it's only women who have to worry about being perceived as hysterical because of patriarchy. So all of this is the feminist's fault. So I calmly express my irritation. Sorry, but I feel you're being really aggressive right now. That's passive aggressive. That's not helping. Same thing would be to be, why do you blame the feminists? Why are you mad? What have feminists done wrong? Articulate your problems with feminism. So he's angry. She's being passive aggressive, and while telling him not to be aggressive, she's portraying herself as a hero in all this. Quite often, this lowers the tone of the discussion, but it doesn't always work. And I allow myself to put an end to unpleasant situations. Okay, I don't think this conversation is going to get us anywhere. Even though it's not always easy to do, in the end, I think it's the best way to get your message across. The only problem is that it works only if everyone does it. I'm not being aggressive. Feminists are the ones attacking me with their bullshit. He's telling you they're attacking him. In a sane conversation, you would want to know why. Give me examples, right? But in her world, the straw man archetype just hates feminists. He's always super duper angry. Maybe he has a reason for being angry. Have you considered that? Like, does a black person say to you, "I am mad about white oppression," and you say, "Oh well, I don't know if you should be that aggressive." I don't think. No, the intersectionalism recognizes the validity of anger of the oppressed classes, but it doesn't recognize the validity of anger when expressed by one of the privileged classes in their construct. This is the end of conversation. What this illustration of a conversation illustrates is that no one can have a conversation with Emma. Having a conversation means basically being willing to say, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm wrong about my foundations? Let's discuss the implications of that. Now, when talking about matters of faith, the problem is your faith is the groundwork through which you view everything else. And I'm basically not willing to surrender my faith for the context. My faith is who I am, right? I can't like put on let's play the devil's advocate and pretend I'm not. I can't pretend I'm not a Christian. I am a Christian. I am capable of looking at your perspective, looking at what your presuppositions are, and then trying to like see the internal logic of your system. But I'm basically not willing to surrender what I believe is true about God and true about truth to have a conversation with you, because I think it's pointless. If we live in a nihilistic, naturalistic, materialist universe, why talk about this at all? Why don't I just watch movies all day? If I'm just going to die and be forgotten, and there's no greater spiritual truth to the universe, why should I invest myself in any of this whatsoever? Why not just seek my own personal pleasure? Because I'm just going to die, I'm going to be forgotten. None of my actions ultimately are going to really amount to anything. Oh, even if you say, oh, well, you'll participate in creating our utopia. Yeah, the utopia is going to go away too. We're going to go flying into the sun. What will I have done that matters when the planet goes flying into the sun? Well, in a naturalistic, materialist view, in a nihilistic world, nothing. But you need foundations. All right, 42 minutes. That was a... The mental load gave me a mental load. A mental load? What a mental load of crap. All right, this is my anti-SJW comic. I guess the point is, it's basically not enough. I'm kind of a hypocrite because I've been yelling at a feminist comic. The point is, it's not enough to yell at the feminist comic. It's not enough to make a video that's just for the people who are mad about feminism. We have to speak to them like human beings with the full recognition that our arguments are probably going to bounce right off because they have a completely different moral foundation for the universe that makes it unlikely that they will care about these other arguments coming in. I think by now, feminists on the internet have heard the major objections to feminism. They've had chances to hear from men about their misery and their pain and their anger, and the fact that feminism still isn't talking about these problems really with any degree of seriousness, in my opinion. Once in a while, I'll see like a feminist say, well, we've got to talk about helping these young men. And that's good. I want to encourage them to talk about helping these young men, but they should recognize they are late to this party. So if they want to start having a conversation with what the heck are we going to do about all of these young men, running off into fringe ideologies? It's time for feminists to recognize they are late to this party. It's time for them to start listening to people who have actually been on the forefront of talking to young men about their problems. And it's time for them to maybe start deconstructing their own, what is it? Intersectional philosophy that they use as a framework for everything. All right, 45 minutes, that's it. What a rant. This is most definitely a #1 Marmaduke fan uncut video. Okay, I love you guys. Catch you later.